Welcome to Fans Fight Back on Pitch Boxing with myself, Martin Theobald, and with me, Max Williams. How are you, Max?
Well, good, thank you, mate. How are you?
I'm very well, very well. We are here to discuss where we're at, I suppose, with Anthony Joshua. Fallout from the weekend, fallout from Jermaine Franklin, a kind of overview of what we have at present, what we may have in the future, and possibly a look back on what we've had in the past, and try and reconcile what is Anthony Joshua in terms of British boxing, his legacy. And the reason I've got Max on is that Max and I have very differing views.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say I'm somewhat more pro AJ than your good self.
Yeah. I mean, let's start off then with the weekend just gone. So Jermaine Franklin, a man who we know nothing about as UK boxing fans, particularly, other than he came over and got beaten relatively controversially by Dillian Whyte. In a fight that I think many thought Dillian Whyte was going to roll him over as a bit of a comeback post-Tyson Fury. So what do we know about Jermaine Franklin in a sense of where does it leave us with AJ? And what did you make of his performance on Saturday night?
AJ's?
Yeah.
I mean, it leaves you with more questions than answers, I think. I think I thought that he was going to come in and flatten him because partly that may be my pro AJ hat, my pro AJ pajamas and all that stuff, but I just thought he would. I thought he would be delighted not fighting someone who isn't Alexander Usyk, and I thought they would have picked Franklin for a reason, and obviously he didn't. And he didn't fight like a man who particularly wanted to get into a fight, if that makes sense.
I think there were various, where you say you thought he was going to flatten Franklin. I think all of us thought he was going to flatten Franklin. And I think that's a combination of Joshua and Hearn both telling us that he was going to flatten Franklin.
Yeah.
I think it's also an element of Emperor's new clothes somewhat with a new trainer in Derek James. And I think we kind of believe that that means that you're going to get a new performance out of him because Derek James works with Errol Spence and Charlo. And I think there's a third element that Dillian Whyte was probably on balance slightly better than Franklin. And we believe that Joshua is levels above Dillian Whyte. And therefore, if Whyte could scrape past him, Joshua ought to bulldoze him and get him out of the way.
It's also only the third points win of his career. I realised checking like Wikipedia today. Right. AJ, like, you think he's sort of won a few, but he's not. He's only ever beaten Ruiz and Parker, and that's it. Yeah. Every other one has been stoppage.
Yeah,
obviously a loss against Usyk and Ruiz, but that's it. Slightly premature, I think, with like Carlos Takam, but most of them, you know, he doesn't normally win on points. That's why you don't expect him to win on points. You were saying you don't know how good Jermaine Franklin is. I mean, God knows, I still don't. The one thing I was wondering is, do you think he's much better than Dominic Breazeale, Eric Molina, or Charles Martin? The three American players who AJ fought in 2016 and beat all three of them by knockout.
My gut feeling is yes, purely because he had that willingness to. He's quite cagey. He obviously knew what he was doing. He looked like a high-level sparring partner to me. And he could throw when Joshua threw. He knew his opportunities to let his hands go. And he had a chin on him. You know, Joshua kind of... Not that I don't feel like they were full power shots for the majority, but when he did let his hands properly go, Franklin wasn't going anywhere.
No.
But I think
again. Sorry, go on.
Well, that comes back to what in 2023, what iteration of Anthony Joshua have we now got? Because when you go back to that Charles Martin, Eric Molina, Dominic Breazeale scenario, we had, you know, we were being sold a Mike Tyson, a British Mike Tyson, essentially. We were being sold a man who had, you know, wiped out Gary Cornish in seconds and
Kevin Johnson, I think. I don't think Dubois stopped when they fought each other a few years
It was
later.
the first time Johnson had been stopped, I think.
Yeah, and
Um,
like we've been told this was good reason. He for 3 or 4 or 5 years there, he was a fucking machine. He was a destroyer. He obliterated people. I think Dillian White was the first person to take him past the 4 or 5 rounds,
yeah.
and then
And then we got to Vlad. And I think this is where the genesis of the change in Joshua came about. For me, I don't think it's Usyk. I don't think it's getting battered by Andy Ruiz in their first fight. I think it's that realization after you've mowed down everybody, including the worst heavyweight champion of all time, in my view, Charles Martin, after mowing down all of that landscape, which when we look back on it is woeful, woeful. Eric Molina, the drummer boy, Dominic Brazil, all of them. And when I say this, I need to caveat it with the fact that Deontay Wilder's CV is no better. So it's not whataboutery. It's not like, oh yeah, well his is rubbish, but so's Deontay Wilder's. I'm just taking it in isolation. That backdated CV is utter trash, up to the point of Klitschko. And even then, you need to caveat that with the fact that Klitschko is coming off of a loss, and therefore, how on earth is he actually fighting for a world title anyway? On the basis you're not meant to after a loss, which why say Liam Smith went to a leisure centre in Barcelona before he got to fight for a world title. And Klitschko had taken a gap year. He'd gone off doing whatever he was doing post Tyson Fury.
I would say that the version of Klitschko that Fury beat looked awful. I mean, maybe Fury makes him look awful. It's hard to be sure, but he looked like someone he looked like an old man in that fight, and looked like someone just couldn't really be fucked with this. And the Joshua version, I think, seemed a bit more engaged. I think maybe I wouldn't immediately say the Fury one was better than the Joshua one, if that makes sense. I don't know what would happen if you could magically clone the two and they fought, but
yeah, it is impossible.
It looks good.
It's impossible to say. What I would say is that Klitschko's a very wise, very smart boxer. He chose never to let his hands go against Fury, and I think what we've maybe seen of Fury in the years post that, and given that Emmanuel Stewart had worked with Klitschko and worked with Fury, and Stewart had always picked out Fury as the successor in time.
That's an interesting thought. I'm not even occurred to me yet, but in a way they've sort of swapped positions, Fury and Joshua, haven't they? Fury's gone from this sort of technical trying to win it on the points, and is now icing guys, and AJ's gone from this destroyer, mows them down, and is now trying to win fights off a jab. It feels like
off a jab and a clinch.
The only issue is I think Fury's doing a much better impersonation of 2017 AJ than they did 2015 Fury. But yeah, they have slightly. I don't know. I think the huge question for anyone, following for what happens next with AJ is he ever gonna be that guy again? Is he ever gonna be able to come out there and just be like, I'm gonna take a shot to land a shot? We're gonna get into a fight. I know that if I hit you, you're fucking going down. And even though he wins an awful lot on TKO, I think, technical knockouts. AJ, if you look down, he often get up, but he normally.
Can you remember the last person he starched? He absolutely iced in a ring.
Povetkin, barely. I think Povetkin stays down. I think maybe gets up again and then smash. I can't remember, to be honest. Povetkin, I thought, was actually his best performance in many ways. I've seen most of his fights, and I do think Povetkin was like the one. But yeah, you're right. No, he doesn't starch Chapman. He doesn't starch people the way Wilder starches them.
Which is fine.
Which is fine. Very few people do.
It's not a requirement, is it? Like in football, you don't need to score a 30-yarder that hits the back of the net. It counts if it dribbles over the line.
Yeah, like Fury he stopped White was a one-punch knockout, wasn't it? But the Wilder one, Wilder just kept getting up again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we will see. But whether or not AJ is able to get that back, I don't know. Does he want to get that back? I don't know. Is he sort of before each fight thinking this will be the night when I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna recapture the sort of what I don't want to say warrior spirit. It sounds patronizing because obviously everyone who gets in there, you know, is going in there to fight. But you know, that sense of like the British Mike Tyson, you know, as you described it, does he want to be that again? I don't know. I'm not sure if he does, but as you say, he's saying he's going to knock out Jermaine Franklin in the build up, and I'm sure he believes that. You know, I'm sure he does. So yeah, I don't quite know what we're left with. What the 2023 Joshua model is a hard one to decipher.
It is, and as you say, can he get that old spirit back and that old mindset? Don't know. What I do know is that at 33 years old, he's not suddenly going to become that technical
No,
architect that other boxers may be, because yes, he's got the fundamentals, but he hasn't got that natural fluidity of a Fury. He hasn't got that ability to everything looked a little bit robotic to me on Saturday night. Everything.
He's a big fucking dude as well. Like just you know, he's not gonna be able to like flow around like you know Muhammad Ali versus what Cleveland Williams that fight when you know Ali's basically dancing. He can't do that because he's 6'7" or something. He's ginormous. You know, it's like he's sort of not fighting. He's trying to be somebody he isn't.
Yeah, he's almost caught between numerous ideologies, I think, which are probably, you know, that might be an echo of the fact that he's been through Rob McCracken, he's been through Angel Fernandez, he's been through Robert
everyone's
Garcia.
saying, you know, sorry, everyone was saying that, you know, why is he staying with McCracken? Like, he needs to move, and now he's moved, and everyone says that, well, he should have just, you know, you've got too many voices now, haven't you? So it is one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't, I think. I think part of the issue, maybe he's almost, technically almost got too good, if you see what I mean. Like, he's almost, you know, he beat Joseph Parker fighting cautiously, and maybe that, and then the Ruiz rematch, you know, maybe made him think, okay, I can do it like this, but I don't think he can. I don't think he can against anyone particularly good. I do think he can beat Fury. I really do. I'm not saying I think that doesn't mean I think he will, but I think he can beat Fury. But I don't think he can beat him fighting how he fought against Jermaine Franklin on Saturday. I mean, you know, it's like it's just like your worst version of the same thing. It's like, you know, Coke and then Coke Zero, like which, you know, you want the real thing, you want Coca-Cola, and he's never going to be that. But if he goes in there and just lays it on Fury, like he would have done in 2017, yeah, of course he can catch him. Obviously, he can catch him. Wilder's caught him 4 times. He's just got up again. Now maybe we'll get up again with Joshua, but you don't know that for sure. Like, look at Eubank Jr., you know.
Yeah.
Everyone's got a chin until they don't in the sport. And there's no guarantee that, if Joshua hits Fury, he could stay down. But he's got to hit him. In order to hit him, you kind of need to go forward and throw 10, 15 punches in a row and just basically, if I get knocked out, so yeah. And he's not fought like that for a while.
Yeah. And I think, to me, it seems like one of his biggest strengths was always that mental strength. It always came over like he was a very stoic individual, very able to shut out an awful lot of things in his life, you'd suspect, because he was a commercial monster as much as he was a sporting monster. And then we saw the gaps, and then we started to see, you know, post-Usyk, the meltdown. And then we saw Saturday night, 36 minutes of fighting Franklin, and then in the 37th minute, he decides that he wants to really fight Franklin. And you're like, this is all a little bit strange. And then some of the interviews after, one that he did with Radio Raheem, where he's talking about Lomachenko, calling him a big, strong man or something. He took offense at that. And there are various things that you just start to think, is it unraveling a little bit? Like, and hand on heart, I can completely understand if it is, because he was never seemingly born to do this. He kind of accidentally got into boxing, became very good at it, won an Olympic gold, and then the commercial monster of Matchroom and Sky started getting on to, building him up. Actually, he's a 33-year-old man. He's far younger than me. I'm not sure I could deal with all that pressure and that
No, of course
stress.
not. I mean, I think very few boxers, very few sportsmen have to deal with that pressure. Tyson Fury doesn't really. Is Tyson Fury is even now like he's a big name? Is he as big as AJ was
No.
and probably still is? No. How many billboards do you see Tyson Fury staring out of? How often does Tyson Fury turn up on an advert selling you something that's nothing to do with sport whatsoever?
Yeah.
He's got vast amounts of commercial obligations, and yeah, I definitely think there must be that sort of yin and yang, that push and pull between having to sort of present this corporate friendly and friendly image while also having to go into the ring and beat people up for a living, and which I honestly don't know. And again, I've met him once briefly. Um, but I don't know which one is close to the real thing. I honestly don't know. And like
Yeah.
no one seems to know. Like you hear, you'll listen to an interview with someone or a podcast of someone, and I'll say, well, Joshua's really just like this guy from the street who's made himself, presentable for brands, and but that person's still in there. But then you listen to another one, and I'll say, with equal certainty, Joshua's really just this, corporate, glossy, motivational speaker type who sort of is making himself go and fight these people, but deep down, in another life, he's a very successful estate agent, which he probably would have been. And yeah, which one is the real one? As far as there is one, I don't know. And again, I don't think anyone really does.
And I wonder if he does. I wonder
No, I
if,
know.
again, his whatever his root, whatever his kind of genesis was, and where he started off, he's clearly evolved as a person, as everybody will have, between the ages of 24 and 33. He's come away from that, whatever that may be. You wonder if he's now kind of stuck in this conundrum of, I've got more than enough money to retire tomorrow. Do I need to be doing this? Do I want to be doing this? There's part of me that thinks he probably just would rather go away and be a pundit or something. Like,
I suspect he will be both a really good pundit, and I suspect he will become really, the British public will take him to their hearts, when he's retired. I think you'll see him a lot more relaxed. Not that he's not a relaxed figure entirely, quite, but I think it'll be like when you see, like, you remember Ed Miliband's leader of the Labour Party, and he just looked so awkward every time we did a TV interview or anything. He looked so awkward because he was like desperately trying to be like this leadership type. And then when he resigned, and he seemed to become a lot more chilled out, and he started going on like the last leg and stuff. And it just seemed like, oh, why weren't you like that the whole time?
yeah,
Seemed like a more relaxed person, more comfortable in his own skin. And I think the same thing will happen to AJ when he retires. I think he'll become super chilled out. I think he'll be, yeah, I think he'll be really like embraced by the public. And again, like with everything, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. And I think when his career is over, people will look back and really realize that it'll be a long, long time, I think, until we see someone filling up stadiums basically every fight, as in like 90,000 seater stadiums. And when a long time do you see a boxer, as I say, turn up on billboards or turn up on adverts? And maybe that's what people don't like about him. And that's fair enough because, I get it. It's that tallest poppy thing. There is something about him that's a bit too perfect. And, that's fair. Like he looks like we sent a human to Mars to like go and sort of
yeah,
show the very physical peak of humanity. You'd send Anthony Joshua probably. Like he looks like fucking Adonis. And he's made all this money, and he's always had this incredibly quite gilded path. Let's be honest, through boxing. Fought won Olympic gold, bloody blah, and yeah, I think it's been an amazing career, and I can understand why people don't appreciate it as much as perhaps they should, or maybe I would like them to. But
that
when
was
it's done, I will.
I. I'm not. Not that I'm anti AJ. I'm just not completely sold on the AJ everything about him. And I think there's, again, if I run back through his CV, I just think there are too many caveats I could draw around near enough everybody on there that he's beaten. I'm just going to turn my camera back
How
off
many
and on.
boxes?
And yes, I 100% appreciate every single heavyweight because they seem to refuse to fight one another all the time. You've got this problem, but why haven't we got to a scenario whereby you just shove Hergovich, Joyce, Usyk, Wilder, Fury, Joshua, put White in there as well? 7 names. Let's have 3 years where they all just round robin it.
Well, yeah, I
Like,
mean, obviously that would be ideal, wouldn't it? But
yeah, but instead we've
maybe the
had
wrong
years
sport.
and years and years of Chisora and Eric Molina and Dominic Breazeale, Joseph Parker, all of these names that nobody really cares about.
Park had a world title when he fought AJ.
Absolute, I don't care. You name me his best win, Andy Ruiz probably. Andy, like, who's Joshua's best win? I couldn't even tell you that particularly.
Klitschko Povetkin would be his best wins. Klitschko
Yeah,
Povetkin and probably White, maybe, or maybe Ruiz. You
yeah,
can
but I
make
mean,
an
who's Ruiz's best win? If you take Joshua out, yes, it's Joshua.
well,
But outside
Joshua.
of Joshua,
Oh God, I don't know. Lewis or
exactly like this. This is where it
yeah,
all
you're
falls
right.
down, and
But
it falls down for every heavyweight in that
yeah,
same
who's
argument.
Fury's best win? Wilder. Who's Fury's second best win? Klitschko. But who's Fury's third best win?
Yeah,
Chisora. Well,
White.
White probably. It must be
Yeah,
White now, yeah.
yeah. I
So
mean, it all falls apart with all of them. They're all guilty. They're all culpable of not making these fights that would give the legacy that they should
but
have and
Usyk's
they
the one
deserve.
who
But out of all of that, as I say, I'm not sold on the concept of Joshua at 33 years old. I'm not convinced I ever will be by the time he retires. But what I will give him immense credit for is he has carried the sport in the UK for the best part of 5, 6 years, if not longer.
hmm,
He took that wave of where Froch and Groves had left Wembley and kind of shut the door behind them, and he's kind of found the key and he's reopened it, and he's used Wembley, he's used Tottenham, he's used Cardiff, he's used all these big stadiums. Like the fact that him going to the O2 and selling it out on Saturday night seems like a step down is testament to how good he has been commercially and how much he has
yeah.
carried the sport and opened opportunities for others in the UK as well. He carried that Sky platform for what 6, 7 years as the figurehead to it, and there are many fighters that probably wouldn't have the opportunities, like Lawrence Okoli, because he was part of 258 management, Joshua Boazzi, part of 258 management. Joshua opened doors for them. 100% he did. They've gone on and done their own things with it. But if it wasn't for Joshua being so commercially successful and being able to bring those fighters along with him on the journey, then the sport would be in a worse place in the UK, were it not for Anthony Joshua.
Yeah, we've been
100%
in a
believe.
sort of golden age. I mean, maybe it's not the most golden age ever, but the British boxing, I think, last 10 years, maybe you say Froch Groves 2 is sort of is a starting point, or Froch Groves 1 or whatever. I think it's been a bit of a golden age. You've had fighters who everyone's, AJ obviously the biggest one, but you've had loads of big stars, big names fighting on Sky, back pages of the newspapers, turning up on adverts. As someone who's followed boxing 15 years or whatever, like it's so much more public, more visible now than it was, 2013. And I think that golden age is ending. And not just because AJ is retiring, or not retiring, obviously, but AJ will be gone. AJ is close to the end of his career than the start. And I don't know who else, who anyone is going to replace. Like, there don't seem to be that many potential breakout stars, even if they're not quite as big as him. Anyway, we'll see about that. But yeah, I think it's been a mini golden age, and he's not entirely responsible for it, but he's done a lot for it. It's
Yeah, and it almost creates that false expectation that stadium fights are the standard. They're not the standard. They were never the standard. They were the exception. Joshua made them the standard for a number of years.
I, I don't know how many. I've not researched this, but I would happily bet that we've had more stadium fights since 2014, last 10 years, than we had in, let's say, the last 50 maybe in the UK. I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'd happily bank that he's sold, he's personally responsible for 500,000 tickets being sold over his career, which is a remarkable feat. A remarkable feat. Which is also, and I don't always give the man credit because there are certain things I don't agree with that happen, but Eddie Hearn is a huge part of that. Eddie Hearn should take credit for, yes, you're given this gold medalist heavyweight, looks like an Adonis. He's beautiful. You couldn't draw the man. If you did, you'd be told it kind of looked too perfect. You've been handed that on a plate, but you still have to make it work, and you still have to invest, and you still have to.
And you only need to look at, what Daniel Dubois to realize how easy it is to not quite. I mean, it's not fucked up his career, but certainly, he's had a defeat. He might now be going in against Usyk for full of world titles, which seems mental. But Dubois looked like an absolute blue chip, can't miss, guaranteed world champion. And I still think he probably will be at some point, but fucking hell, throwing him against Joe Joyce, seemed like a fairly bold time, and now looks insane. And you can easily fuck up his career. Or even like someone like Eubank Jr., who we both a big fan of. But let's face it, Eubank Jr., I think could have been 3 times, twice as big as he is. Could have been as big as Joshua, not a million miles away from it. And
yeah, unless people that were handling him knew that he was susceptible to certain types of fighters and therefore avoided it throughout his entire career. But that's for a different recording on a different day. But before we go, because we've only got a few minutes left.
Well, I've got a question for you, actually.
Go.
I've got 2 questions. First is, who would you make him fight next? Because the Fury fight might well be there in the summer, and it probably won't be there in the winter, because I think they'll go back with Usyk when Saudi Arabia's available. But obviously, if he loses to Fury, that could be it. He could fight Dillian White, which is much less of a risk, but still a bit of a risk. But then even if you win, I think Fury Usyk will be tied up. So if you were him or you were Eddie Hearn, what do you do?
If I'm allowed to control his career and he gets no say
in it, comes to you and says, Martin, whatever you tell me to do, I'm doing it. You can cross out my career, Martin.
I would just cash him out at this point. I know that sounds horrible, but I would just do the Fury fight. If you lose it, which he probably does, I don't think there's any harm in losing to Fury. And there's huge money in doing so, like ridiculous money. I don't care if Joshua doesn't hold a world title. There is just such a big pot of money associated to that fight that could take place anywhere in the world. Anyone would pay for it. And then I would do Wilder, just as like a retirement fight. And they're the 2 fights that have eluded his career. Give him huge credit for taking Usyk when he didn't have to. It was a mandatory, could have swerved it. Give him huge credit for that. But the 2 fights, the 2 names that aren't on his CV are Wilder and Fury. They're his peers. Just fight them both. Like, literally nobody cares at this point. Look at Amir Khan, who retired last year. Nobody cares about the number of people he lost to, really. Like, at this point in his career, you just have memories of the fights that he had, win or lose. Doesn't matter. Like, I don't care at this point in Joshua's career if he gets starched by Wilder, if he starches Wilder, if he, ended up losing a points lost to Fury. I don't care. Like, I just want to see those fights before they all hang them up. You'll make money. You'll make
go Fury before Wilder, Fury rather than Wilder before Fury, because I think he's got a better chance. I think he's got a very good chance against Wilder.
I think Wilder's just a shootout. Like, just do that as the finale. Just do that as the last fight for both of them. Even mark it as that. Like, just 2 big, strong men that can punch, that are susceptible, and they've talked about doing this for the last 10 years. Let's do it. Why wouldn't you? How much money is that worth?
That 2018 Joshua Wilder fight, when they were both unbeaten champions, for me is like the great lost fight of boxing, and it's bigger than even if, let's say, Spence Crawford never happens, it's bigger for me than Mayweather Pacquiao not happening in 2010, 2012, or whenever. That
Yeah,
fight would have been
yeah.
just
And
unbelievable.
And as soon as I think about it, I think of the little video. I can't remember if it was on IFL or something like that. Barry Hearn sat by a fishing lake in his chair, looking over his shoulder, talking to a camera, going, "No, we don't need to do that fight yet. We do that fight down the line. Is worth so much more money down the line. Both fighters go and lose. It's worth less money than it ever was." Doesn't mean I don't want to see it still. I don't need a world title attached to it. I just need like those two men to finally meet in the ring.
My second question to you would be: do you think AJ's over or underachieved in his career?
Uh, I would say he's overachieved in a sense, which is daft, really. He's an Olympic gold medalist, but he's a man who accidentally fell into boxing late on in life. He probably didn't deserve his Olympic gold medal. They're two very contentious decisions that are probably hometown decisions on his way to getting it. Um, so the Olympic gold medal is almost a fallacy to some degree, but he's got it. And he's been very well managed throughout his career, very well matched throughout his career. The fact that Hearn, fair play again to Hearn for putting up the money to go and get Charles Martin. As soon as Charles Martin won that world title, and they went, "Bosh, whatever you need, $5 million, you get on that plane. We're having that world title. Come and hand deliver that world title to the O2." And then from that point onwards, they built up such a career for him, such a reputation. They picked up those world titles along the way. For a man who accidentally fell into boxing later on in life, I think it's almost impossible to say he hasn't overachieved, like both commercially. Again, you go back to the story for a lad who was on tag in Watford because he was picked up with a bit of, whatever it was, the paraphernalia that he had on him at the time, wasn't allowed to leave Watford Centre after certain hours. Taking that, if you'd have taken Anthony Joshua at that moment in time and said, in 20 years' time, you will be a commercial powerhouse, the face of Luca's age, you'd have advertised Land Rover, you'll be worth millions and millions and millions of pounds. I'm sure you couldn't even believe that that could be achievable. So I think in every aspect of life, he's overachieved. And I love that story for him that he has. So I'm not anti AJ. I love where AJ is. I'm just not sold on the concept of AJ.
I completely agree with you, but I do think there's just a couple of big what ifs. Like, number one, what if he fights Wilder in 2018? And also, what if he doesn't lose to Ruiz, which I stand by. They fight fucking 100 times. AJ wins at most of them, like quite a lot. And certainly you start from that round 3 when Ruiz gets up off the canvas. I reckon you could, game that scenario 100 times, and 99 of them end with Ruiz, smeared all over the ropes again. But and he hits one punch, and then what happens if he doesn't lose to Ruiz? Who fucking knows? Very hard to say. He probably loses to Usyk at some point down the line.
Those sliding doors moments. What if he just dropped the WBO title? Because lots of boxers have done it in the past and said, "Look, I don't want that fight. Commercially, it's not worth it. It's a difficult fight. There are better options elsewhere. I'll take on Usyk down the road." He could have done that and gone and done some other fights. Other boxers would have done the same thing. Nobody would particularly blame him for doing so. So again, complete credit to Joshua for taking that challenge head on. Because in hindsight, it's a really bad decision.
Yeah, and it's an awful matchup as well. I think it's just just this fast, speedy fighter who's basically born in a boxing ring.
In the same way, Joshua probably beats Ruiz 80% of the time. Usyk probably beats Joshua 80% of the time.
So. I would say so. Whereas I don't think Wilder beats him 80% of the time. I think it's probably is about 50-50. Who knows?
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll find out. Is there anything else, mate? We've got 1 minute 40 seconds.
No, I'd say that's it. I want to see that honeymoon at the end of his career now. Like, just go round. I realise it may not be good for his longer term health, but it'd be great for his legacy.
It probably won't do that much damage for longer term health. I think it was just one or two one-offs. It will be okay. I agree. It will be lovely to see it. I think we probably will. Although I do wonder if the next defeat maybe
Yeah.
maybe
Well,
the one he decides he's had enough with.
yeah.
Because he's like, what the fuck am I doing this for? Like, bank balance, he's got a son, doesn't he? He's got everything you could hope for out of life.
Yeah,
You
there's only so many times that a £10 million payday is super attractive, I'd suspect.
Yeah, I can imagine Wilder and Fury. I think he'll try and fight, but if he does lose to one, if he loses the first one of those two fights in a sort of violent fashion, it wouldn't amaze me if he then decided fuck this. But hopefully not. Hopefully he beats them both, and then
Yeah,
becomes champion of the
yeah.
world, and then retires undefeated.
Ty is a national treasure.
Then has the Usyk trilogy and sparks them out.
There we go. That's how it ends. That's how the career ends. And that's how this ends. So, Max, thank you very much. We shall see what's next for Joshua in the rest of this year. Appreciate it very much for Pitch Sport. Take care.